3 weeks to go, and there is so much at stake. The breakdown starts now. Welcome to the breakdown. I'm Tara Setmayer. This is the Rick Wilson, and there's so much going on. I'm like in a weird mood, Rick. There's part of me I'm fired up. There's part of me that's melancholy. There's part of me that's like, what is happening? And there's part of me that's like, people were kicking ass during the debates. Like, I'm all over the place. I'm in a weird space today, given that we're 3 weeks away from this election. There's just so much.
It is 3 weeks to go.
And
you know, Tara, I'm in a good state today. We've got a ton of ads coming down the pike for everybody. We see the angles that are starting to work in this campaign for messaging. And our friend Evan McMullin last night, dragged Mike Lee across the stage like a rented mule.
Yes, I tweeted out that he dragged Mike. I said he dragged Mike Lee.
That put me in a surprisingly good mood.
It was like, there was like, because stupid Mike Lee, you know, you guys hear me say this a lot on the show where I talk about the sanctimony of Republicans over the years, pulling out their freaking pocket constitutions all the time. Mike Lee actually did this during the debate last night. And I was watching it and I went, oh, for fuck's sake. So typical and pathetic. And what did Evan McMullin do? Dragged him across that stage by his own pocket constitution, pointing out the fact that Mike was part of the whole election denier, election fraud, fake electors scheme in the beginning.
Sidney Powell and John Eastman.
Right.
I mean,
all of that.
It was just it was a work of beauty.
Yes, it was. Actually, before we get to our last week in the Republican Party, because that's, you know, what we do on Tuesdays, we're talking about the Evan McMullin debate. Let's run our rapid response on it. In case you didn't see it, I'm assuming most people didn't watch the Utah Senate debate last night.
We're nerds here at the Lincoln Project.
Exactly. This is our life. So we watch it so you don't have to. Here's our rapid response.
Senator Lee, the Constitution is not a prop for you to wave about and then when it's convenient for your pursuit of power to abandon without a thought. That's what you've done with that, okay? If you're committed to the Constitution, then stand up for our free and fair elections. Stand up for the peaceful transfer of power. You said that the president should listen to legal quack Sidney Powell. Please make time for her. Let her in, you told the White House chief of staff. For you to talk about the importance of the Electoral College, I think is rich. I think you know exactly how important it is. And I think you knew how important it was when you sought to urge the White House that had lost an election to find fake electors to overturn the will of the people. You told the president that you were working overtime, 14 hours a day, I think you said, to unravel this for him. To keep a president who had been voted out of office according to the will of the people in power despite the will of the people. Senator Lee, that was the most egregious betrayal of our nation's Constitution in its history by a U.S. Senator, I believe, and it will be your legacy.
Ouch. A constant pocket constitutional mic drop right there. I'm so proud of Evan. He's a good friend of both of ours. I voted for Evan actually in 2016, and so did Mike Lee. And I sat on the board of Evan's organization, Stand Up Republic, as a founding board member for years until this year. And he left that to go run for Senate, and then the organization merged in with the Forward Party, which I wasn't in agreement with because I just didn't think that was the right direction. But I'm proud of the work that we did fighting for democracy, and Evan really has a shot, which is the most important thing for this conversation. Basically, he's within the margin of error, which is why Mike Lee is out there begging for Mitt Romney's endorsement, because Mitt Romney's been like, yeah, I'm not endorsing you, but I'm not going to endorse Evan either because Evan's running as an independent. But his silence, Mitt Romney's silence in Utah, speaks volumes. And so, you know, this is a race to pay attention to, along with a lot of other ones. But I was really, that's how you debate somebody like Mike Lee. You come prepared.
It's a tough race in a conservative state, but the Democratic Party of Utah did something really, really, really smart and said, okay, you know what? We can't field a progressive here we're going to win with. So we're going to get behind McMullin with independents, Bannon line Republicans, and Democrats.
Yep.
There may be a coalition that makes it home there.
And I think if he wins, that sets up an example where in other states where that can work, where that could possibly work to take out some of these MAGA Republicans statewide. So a lot is riding on that.
Trivia Olson and I were talking today about this. And if Evan does win this race, it is a cataclysmic moment in American politics. It is a gigantic moment in American politics where the idea that the two-party system has a lockdown on every major state and every major seat is put to the test and broken.
Yes.
And I truly believe, again, it's a hard race. Evan has a high hill to climb.
It's true.
He's done very, very well. Mike Lee is an insufferable, smarmy snake of a guy.
Mm-hmm.
And Evan last night also presented something that having been out in Utah in 2016, and then again in 20, sort of watching the sort of political culture there is a degree to which Evan's message last night, not against Mike Lee, but more affirmatively, was very spot on.
Yes.
Talking about, an independent representative for the state, talking about someone who would give the state enormous power in the process. Because while he says he won't caucus with either the Republicans or the Democrats, correctly, by the way, he will work with whoever's going to get Utah what it needs. That is absolutely a
brilliant
position
messaging,
of enormous power and leverage.
Yes.
And if you can get it, you should ride it.
That's right. Absolutely. And that's why Evan is overperforming. He's overperforming from what anybody thought. Mike Lee is on his heels, and that's a good position to be in. And even if he doesn't win, it's still, I think, the fact that he was even competitive in this race is a great template, I think, moving forward for cross-partisan candidates and for people who are sick of the party politics. So kudos, Evan. Keep up the good work, my friend, out there. That's right. So that was one of the good things. Well, I think it's time now to talk about the crazy, because we saw some polling, which is what has me in a weird mood.
Tara, crazies, what are you talking about? Our politics in this country is so well adjusted right now.
It's fucking nuts. And the polling today from the New York Times that showed that more than a third of independent voters and a smaller noteworthy part of Democrats are open to supporting candidates that reject the 2020 election over economic issues just made me want to. Exactly. I just wanted to scream. I'm like, what are you people thinking? More people said that they wouldn't. They'd feel uncomfortable, but it's still like, yeah, but economic issues are more important to us than basically democracy. And I cannot emphasize enough how incredibly dangerous that is. I understand the behavior, but we are still doing what we're doing to convince people why that logic is dangerous for us moving forward. So
the Twitter personality, I know her name, but I'm not sure she's out fully.
Yeah.
Mueller, she wrote
on
Twitter today. She tweeted something I thought was extremely wise. Inflation is temporary. Fascism is forever. Vote accordingly.
I saw that. And I thought, absolutely, like, why don't Democrats use that? Because that's the truth here. It's so true. That doesn't matter if Republicans take back the House or the Senate or any of it. They're not going to be able to do shit to change the economic trajectory that we're on right now. These are the inflation, the economy. These are cyclical things that happen over years. Nothing is an instant
and around
fix.
The world, by the way.
Correct. And so, like, this is not something that if all of a sudden Republicans have Congress back and Marjorie Taylor frickin' Greene is chairman of the Oversight Committee, and Lauren Boebert's chairman of the Finance Committee, that we're going to all of a sudden change everything overnight. This is a fallacy, and I don't understand why Democrats haven't gotten this message.
Tara, it's worse than that, though. It's worse than that. What they're saying is, we're going to do a debt ceiling showdown and shut down the government.
Again with this.
I'm thinking the best thing to do during an economic crisis is to crash the government, crash the stock market, and send America into an economic tailspin.
Right.
That's brilliant. And that's what Kevin McCarthy is now promising in order to keep Marjorie Three Toes and the rest of these morons on the that are breathing down his neck. Happy.
If you don't
by the way, I just want to loop back on one other thing. Tara, you were the first out of the gate saying that Kevin McCarthy's not going to be the speaker, I heard a rumor today that I started following up. Someone mentioned it as an idea this morning. I started following it up today, that while Elise said she's still going to run for conference chair, she's not necessarily going to run for conference chair, Kevin. Watch your back, bro.
Oh, so we have another one.
She's afoot.
I'm not surprised.
I'm not either.
She is
I'm not either. But she's the Gretchen Wieners of the mean girl of Congress. And if Kevin thinks that she will not shank him and dance in his blood, he is mistaken.
Of course she will. She's already demonstrated she's willing to do that to get to where she is thus far. So why does Kevin McCarthy think that he's immune to this? Let me just say this before we run the last week in the Republican Party. This idea, there's 2 books out right now where Kevin McCarthy is pretty much at the center of. Robert Draper just put out an excerpt from his book about how the Republican Party lost its freaking mind. And in it talks all about the power of the concerning power that Marjorie Taylor Greene has. And she talks about how, listen, Kevin better give me what I want because, I run the party. Like, I represent the base of the party. And if he doesn't give me what I want, then he's going to feel the wrath of the base. And that's why Kevin McCarthy has been piling around with her. This woman was stripped of her committee's assignments early on in her congressional career because of her extremism. Right. So she's been doing nothing but trolling people and raising money off of it for the last year and a half, almost 2 years. And now she's in a position of power because guess what? There's a bunch of MAGA Republicans who could potentially win, hopefully not, but could, that make Kevin McCarthy and his ambitions to be speaker moot. So he's kissing her ass and all the rest of them, placating them and giving them what they want for power. And these books are talking about this. The same thing with impeachment. There's another book out now that talks about the failed impeachment attempts by Congress with Trump and how Kevin McCarthy was so upset about what Trump had done, how he knew what Trump was doing was dangerous at the time to do the election lie stuff, and put all that aside, cast all of that aside to maintain power. This guy is never going to get it. It says that Trump called him the biggest pussy in Washington, D.C. Who's voting for this guy? They can't wait to throw him out under the bus.
That's the other thing I think Kevin underestimates is Trump's absolute sadism.
Yes.
Because he'll wait till it's this close and McCarthy's almost got it. And then he'll say, Kevin McCarthy was never loyal to me. He's weak. We need someone strong, MAGA.
Yes. Hello, Speaker Jim Jordan or Speaker Elise Stefanik. That is.
And as a reader just pointed out, you can't spell Stefanik without stink.
Yeah, that's right. Well, speaking of stink, last week in the Republican Party, it's Tuesday.
It's a good one, folks.
Roll it.
Yes. If Herschel's badge is a prop, then I guess this badge I wear every day to protect the citizen, I guess it's a prop also.
I'm seeing God's vision unfold here, but I've got more to do in the fight. So go to 1776coin.com.
I walk into my room, which I had a bedroom in the basement, and the bottom line is Jesus physically appears. By the way, I wasn't drunk and I wasn't doing drugs.
AOC stands for All Out Communist. Okay?
Some people like this.
I know they do. It's scary.
I'm going to win the election and I will accept that result.
If you lose, will you accept that?
I'm going to win the election and I will accept that result.
If I were to fight for anybody, it would be Vladimir Putin.
Black people, this is me. This is the black race, and this is me.
This anti-white racism is growing, and it's dangerous.
That's why Make America Great Again means so much to me. I love what this country once was. For the civil rights movement.
Remember Kavanaugh? Remember Kavanaugh? Yeah. Aren't you tired of this crap?
That's why I'm here in Pittsburgh, Kansas.
It has cost us more not to complete the wall that we already contracted for than to actually build it.
Do you believe in genital mutilation of children under the age of 18?
Did I come in contact with members of the Oath Keepers? Yes.
He verbally declassified them. That's as good as gold.
So many of my friends are in this room, and they happen to be Jewish. And they said tonight,
oh, I'm anti-Semitic? Yeah, I piss on your towel.
You know, I believe in reducing insulin, but at the same time, you got to eat right.
Globalist, satanic bastards.
Where do you want to start, Rick?
You know, I looked down to check a message when we were in that, and I heard the phrase "globalist, satanic bastards," and all I could think was, "You rang."
Yeah, right. Well, I just heard bastards, and I thought that's the pot calling the kettle black. Since, you know, Alex Jones, I guess he needs to sell a whole bunch of those coins since he's going to be bankrupted to hell where he belongs for defaming those poor Sandy Hook families all those years, right? Didn't that settlement come out since we've been together? Almost $1 billion.
About $1 billion, a billy.
Good. Fuck him. I can't. I have no
aliens with a B in front, bitch.
Yes. But there's no shaming these people. You see him out there. He was laughing during the trial when they were reading off the punitive damages. He was laughing about it on air in real time. Like, there's just no shaming these pieces of shit, and I have no tolerance for them. Speaking of that, I have no tolerance for Herschel Walker and his nonsense too. Speaking of debates. We watched on Friday night. I don't know what everybody else was doing. My Friday night, I was sitting there watching the Herschel Walker Warnock debate because we're nerds. And when this freaking guy flashed that fake badge and people laughed and, you know, oh, whatever. Again, I was infuriated because I come from a law enforcement family. So this like stolen valor, wannabe, cosplay cop thing by a guy who actually bragged about wanting to shoot cops, that brags about wrote a book in his book, not unapologetically, about how he put a gun to his ex-wife's head and threatened to kill her. He has, violent tendencies, and he pretends
he might as well have stock in Planned Parenthood.
Yeah, right. He's running around, 4 different women, 4 different kids, talking about family values, and he flashes a badge because he's a wannabe police officer. I cannot. It's so disrespectful.
Tara,
people who legitimately earn that badge every single day and put their lives on the line. And this fucking guy is out there pretending to be a police officer, and Republicans are praising it. Shame on them.
When I was a little kid, I took a flight to New Orleans from Tampa, Florida, and the pilot gave me a set of little brass wings. I don't remember what airline it was. I have them somewhere around. Does that make me a jet pilot? No, it does not.
No.
I have a Space Force badge someone sent me as a joke. Does that make me a member of Space Force? No, it does not.
But people are. But this is the party that's running around with these ads, these crazy dystopian hellscape ads about crime in America and how they back the blue and how Democrats are defunding the police and all of this. Meanwhile, these are the same people that excuse January 6th and who are elevating an ass idiot like Herschel Walker pretending to be a cop. I just can't.
And
make
frankly,
sense for me.
One of the things that I find so remarkable about this moment is Democrats. I'm going to give you some tough love. I don't know who's going to do it, but somebody needs to go to Cori Bush and the microscopic handful of other people who keep saying, no, I am going to defund the police, and tell them to shut the fuck up. I will tell you why. I don't care that they believe it. I care that they give the Republican Party the weapon to hurt every other Democratic candidate in the country. Guys, I want to be very clear about something. Lee Zeldin in New York is now within striking distance. Okay? In Oregon, the Republicans may elect a governor because they are now within striking distance. There are a lot of places in this country where the crime issue is real enough.
Yep.
And with $1 billion worth of advertising, it becomes a decisive issue.
Yes.
Now, I wish we had $1 billion in the bank because we push back for everybody. We do the job. We don't have a spare billion laying around. So we're going to have to go and teach people how to fight this fight again, it seems. Try not to do stupid shit. It's a very simple rule. I know it's tough, but the people who don't explicitly follow Biden's lead and say, no, the party of law and order is the Democratic Party. The party of crime is the Republican Party because they support a guy who stole classified documents, who ordered an assault on the U.S. Capitol, who loves people, the good people on both sides of Charlottesville. So this is an easy argument to turn back on them, but you got to do it.
That's right. They don't do it. I just don't get it. And the other thing too about this is something that as Republicans, we know because we did this for years. They're nationalizing the election. They always do this. And Democrats are still fighting amongst themselves about Social Security, decimal points. Like they are, Republicans have
may I
simplified
recommend nationalizing the election? Democrats, you got 3 weeks to go. 3 weeks exactly. May I recommend trying to nationalize it around the assault on democracy and the criminal Donald Trump? Because if you can push that button hard enough, fast enough, you will find that the Republicans respond to it. They can't not.
That's right. It's right there in front of our faces. All of the fodder that you need is there. Nationalize it about democracy. Nationalize it about taking away rights from women. Nationalize this about the threat that the crazies who will take over the Congress as Republicans, what they'll do when they're in charge.
Show them what the future holds, and you will win.
Yes, they're telling us. They are telling us.
They're explicit about it every day. They're coming out more clearly and saying what they're going to do. We're going to have Hunter Biden laptop investigations. We're going to go and impeach the president. We're going to shut down Washington. We're going to do a debt ceiling crisis drill. They're going to cut off aid to Ukraine.
Yes.
Because I tweeted about this today, folks, and if you think you've seen me rip shit angry in the past, the fact that these scumbags are telling us in advance they're going to side with Vladimir Putin, cut off aid to Ukraine, and kill the Ukrainian people and let Russian tanks, what T-34 is by the point they get there, Russian tanks roll into Kiev, then you are absolutely not getting the point. They're a part of a global movement of pure goddamn evil.
Yes. And I don't want to hear about their pro-democracy. That is a democracy. Those are freedom fighters there. And we were supposed to be the party. Well, Republicans are supposed to be the party that stood for that spread that around the world. Vladimir Putin, tear down this wall. What was it, Stu, who said that Ronald Reagan were alive today? These Republicans would take a brick and stone him to death from the Berlin Wall because they're so off the reservation on things. Oh, there's Nameless. Nameless is joining the party today. Hey, I blocked Tiki out, so I hear him meowing in the basement. I'm sorry, Tiki, I locked you out. But listen, there's just so much hypocrisy here, and so much information, evidence of what they're going to do. That's right there for Democrats to take. And you know what? You know who's a Democrat who gets this? Tim Ryan. Tim Ryan debated JD Vance last night and dragged his ass too with his own words. And ass is almost like, Andy Cohen and Watch What Happens Live, drink when you hear this word. Right. Well, being an ass kisser and an ass has been the theme of the Ohio debates. Take a look at what Tim Ryan did to JD Vance. It's glorious.
You were calling Trump America's Hitler. Then you kissed his ass.
That's not true.
It is true. And then you kissed his ass. And then he endorsed you. And you said he's the greatest president of all time. My little Italian grandmother had a saying for this when she met somebody like JD Vance. Due facce. You have two faces. One for the camera and one for your business dealings. You have to have the courage to take on your own leaders. Mitch McConnell gave you $40 million. To prop up your campaign. Peter Thiel gave you $15 million. That's $55 million, JD. They want your loyalty. And you proved that you'll kiss their ass too. I'm just telling you, I've been in this business. It's tough business. If you think you're going to help Ohio, you're not. If you can't even stand up for yourself, how are you going to stand up for the people of the state?
A thing of beauty. If you can't even stand up for yourself, how will you stand up for the people of this state?
JD Vance is a weirdo. He's a hypocrite. He's a guy who has no business being in this race. And Tim Ryan has run a magnificent race in a very red state. He is showing the path forward. You must approach these idiots with aggression, strength, and confidence. Yes. Because JD Vance is sitting there knowing that he's a complete fake. JD Vance knows he's a complete Everything about him. He sits on a throne of lies.
Yes.
I mean, he smells of meat and cheese. The guy is terrible.
Yeah. And it's all, again, all out there, like in his own words. He's, everything that Tim Ryan went after him on is provable. Like,
of course,
because he said it on freaking Tucker Carlson. The stuff about replacement theory, the stuff, oh, how dare you? The feigned outrage by JD Vance about my biracial kids and blah blah blah. I was like, he's got a black wife. No, he doesn't. But anyway, he has an ethnic wife. But it's like,
he's got a wife. He's got a wife who's a vice president at Goldman Sachs,
very educated.
Who he also says things. It's ironic. I seriously doubt he comes home and says, "Hey, honey, you'll be more liberated back in the kitchen."
Right. She's got like a master's in philosophy. She studied at Cambridge. She went to Yale Law School. She clerked for 2 Supreme Court justices. Okay.
Yeah, sounds like some sort of average low achiever, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Like, yeah, she's somebody that's barefoot and pregnant, and a baby factory that Tim Ryan, that JD Vance wants, since he's has no problem with 10-year-olds who were raped, having to go across state lines to have an abortion. No, he can't have that. He wants them to have babies. Like, it's crazy, this guy. And so
he really is.
Tim Ryan is,
and the guy may win a U.S. Senate seat. But not for lack of being the most egregious dickweed on the spectrum this year in a lot of ways.
But it's just part of the pattern of hypocrites and how they'll say or do anything, and how Republicans, it's really more about, Republicans, we've already seen that there's no shame for them and they'll vote for just about anything.
Right.
But it's the independents, it's the people and the disaffected Republicans, again, it goes back to hell with the tax cut or whatever you think you're going to get in the economy in the couple of years that they're going to be there. The consequences of them being there are way worse. They far outweigh any economic benefit you have bullshitted yourself into believing you're going to get while these people are tearing down our democracy.
They have a belief. They have a belief that this election is them versus trans communist whatever. Who knows what it is in their catalog of imaginary demons. But the idea that's in their head, I hope in some ways they believe it, that there's going to be this glorious moment of Republican policy, and that it's going to happen. Some miracle's going to happen. I got to tell you, folks, it's not. No. They thrive on chaos. They depend on destruction. Their entire world is centered around causing pain, distress, disorder, chaos. That is the entire world they live in. They have to do that to scare the shit out of their base.
Yes. And I don't understand why Democrats don't make those ads. Democrats, Republicans thrive in chaos, and you show the chaos. Democrats are governing, and you show the freaking accomplishments. They've had a lot of accomplishments.
It's so
chaos
versus hard governing. To understand the disconnect, but it's real. And it's part of our job to help people sort of bridge that gap. But
absolutely. And one of the examples of that is out in Arizona. We talk about the union all the time, and we have all these tens of thousands of volunteers across the country, and that we've paired with various grassroots organizations. And Arizona is another one of those places where I don't understand, excuse me, what the Democratic governor's candidate is doing. Katie Hobbs out there, both her and Carrie Cuckoo Lake were on CNN over the weekend, and Katie Hobbs has refused to debate Carrie Lake. So she's letting Carrie Lake get all of this earned media. She is the one that is coming out with confidence. I said this on the Sunday show on MSNBC. Carrie Lake is making crazy look confident and competent because of the way she presents.
Listen, Tara,
and there's no pushback.
I'm going to speak really bluntly about why Carrie Lake is where she's at. Item one, Katie Hobbs. You do not, as we have learned in politics for about 1 billion years, which is how old I am, about 1 billion years old, you do not allow your opponent to define themselves, especially when you have vastly greater resources, when you are an incumbent. They should have framed her out day one, hour one, minute one, as a fucking lunatic.
Yes.
As someone who is out of touch with Arizona. They should have followed the messaging lead that we drove towards, which is She wants to divorce Arizona from the federal government. Okay, goodbye Social Security, goodbye Medicare, goodbye Medicaid, goodbye military pensions, goodbye military bases. And Arizona then is a festering parking lot in the desert when Kari Lake gets done with it. However, what did they do? They let her run. They let her go. They said, we're above this. We're not going to worry about this. This is fine. We're okay.
And now the race is tied.
Okay.
Now the race is tied. And you have an election denier, QAnon lunatic that could be the governor of a state that could determine the 2024 election, just like it did in 2020. You have another election denier. You have an election denier, oath keeper running for Secretary of State, currently winning. So this is incredibly disturbing. And our folks out there in Arizona, we have people on the ground. We, as a matter of fact, great story we found out from our union folks that they ran into Mark Kelly doing some of their lit drops. They were on the ground knocking on doors, and Mark Kelly, the current senator, actually thanked them for LP's ad. We did this unbelievable, one of the best ads of the year, Rick. I have to say it. You guys have produced, called The Right Stuff. That for him, and he thanked us for our work on that. And it's not over because we have another ad called The Ticket. Let's run it.
This isn't complicated. In Arizona's big races, one side believes President Biden won and Donald Trump lost. One side believes the election was fraudulent, which means they don't believe in democracy. One side believes our servicemen and women are the best of America. Blake Masters says it was a mistake that the greatest generation fought in World War II. He wants to fire any military officer who doesn't agree with him politically. And Kari Lake wants to fire the federal government, thinking Arizona can survive without roads, schools, and military bases. No more Social Security or Medicare. One side supports the freedom for women to make healthcare choices without government interference. One side wants to take away individual rights Arizona women have long held. One side represents mainstream Arizona. Their side, a radical cult of violent conspiracies, dangerous ideas, and the end of Arizona. The question is, which side are you on?
The Lincoln Project paid for and is responsible for the content of this advertising.
That's it, folks. That's the ball game.
That's the story. That's the decision.
That's the through line. And this applies to every single one of these states where these Republicans are running and pose an existential threat to the future of our free and fair elections and of our democracy. It doesn't matter where it is. I think it was Lawrence Tribe that tweeted today that any Republican you vote for, you are voting for that chaos. You are voting against our democracy. You are voting for all of the horrible things that people are trying to put their heads in the sand and deny that the Republican Party has become.
Right.
He's absolutely right. And if you don't believe us, just listen and watch and pay attention to what Republicans are doing across the country. Rick, in your home state of Florida, I've got to tell you, I saw the story today and I wanted to scream. It made my fucking blood boil. That bastard DeSantis has this dystopian election security team that he started down there that is going after voters for, quote, voter fraud to make a political point. You know this, you live in Florida, but for years there was a big thing about felons and their voting rights getting restored. And it was really difficult that if you were a felon for you to get your voting rights restored because you had to go through a whole lot of hoops to do that. So most people were like, screw that, we're not doing it. Or they didn't even know they had the option to do it, to get reinstated.
Well, we passed a constitutional amendment in Florida that 66% of Floridians voted for.
That's right. And what year was that? 2018?
Yes, 18.
Yeah, 2018. Finally, Florida cleaned this up and put the people in Florida to have ballot initiatives, like in California, where they can decide if you need to change things in the Constitution there, the state Constitution. I used to live in Florida, so I used to vote there too years ago. But anyway, so now felons have the opportunity to vote, except there were two exceptions: sex offenders and murderers. Right. So a lot of people didn't know this because they make it very confusing that those exemptions were put in there. So since 2018, all of these efforts to get people registered and voting, the word got out, if you were a felon, you can vote now.
If you go through the local county supervisor of elections has to bless it.
Right.
So the arrests you're seeing that happened before this, and now the second wave you're seeing, every single one of those gentlemen every single one was told by their county clerk, yes, you are now qualified to register to vote.
And not only that, in one of the cases, maybe a couple of the other ones too, they were given voter ID cards.
Correct.
So they did everything. So these people did their time. They did everything right as far as they knew. Their county officials in Florida told them, yes, you can vote, gave them voter ID cards for fuck's sake.
Right.
And so what did they do? They went out and voted. Well, this bastard DeSantis has now purged the rolls. It's taken them over a year and a half to do this, to find people very specifically in a certain county to say, oh, they've committed voter fraud because they were felons convicted of either murder or sex offenders who went and purposely voted. What it says in the law, though, is that you have to willfully do it. These people did not willfully commit voter fraud. There is a video.
Guys, listen, I mean, there are three realities here, Tara, that of why this is so offensive. A lot of these folks,
people of color, number one, right?
Well, the vast majority are African Americans.
Yes.
The second part of this is they acted in good faith, and the state told them what was going on. Now, a couple weeks ago, a guy that our audience has never heard of named Pete Antonacci, who was the guy who was put in charge by DeSantis of running the election integrity stuff in Florida.
The election Gestapo team.
There was a fight with DeSantis' chief of staff and some other officials and Pete Antonacci. The Tallahassee story is that Antonacci said, look, guys, these guys aren't to blame. It's the county clerks, if anybody. If you want me to arrest the county clerks, that's what we have to do because they facilitated this.
Right.
The fight was so intense and so ugly that Pete Antonacci walked out and he was a decent guy, by the way, walked out in the fucking hall and died of a heart attack.
Oh my God.
Because these scumbag motherfuckers want to make sure that they scare the shit out of African-American men. They want to make sure they scare the shit out of anybody that doesn't look like them or sound like them. And here's the icing on the goddamn cake by this guy. The hurricane hits 3 major Republican counties in Southwest Florida. And guess what DeSantis does? Issues a special executive order saying, you don't have to show ID. You don't have to prove where you live. Just show up and vote.
Is this not unbelievable? I didn't know the part about the Antonacci thing.
Unbelievable outrage. And if Republicans had a shred of fucking integrity left in their bodies, they would be calling him out on this. But just like with Trump, they're too chicken shit.
Yes. And I hope that Val Demings, who is running a very competitive race, by the way, against little Marco down there, and I hope she wins. And I've said this before. I had hoped that President Biden had picked her to be vice president because that would have blunted a lot of this crime nonsense that Republicans are using against Democrats. She was a police officer and a chief of police in Orlando. She's not talking about defunding the police. But anyway, that's in the past now. She is in a competitive race, raising a hell of a lot of money against Marco Rubio. Again,
and from what we can see on the Chiron here, she's apparently already beaten Marco's ass with a broom.
Yes, well, she's a tough cookie. I love her, and people should pay attention to that race too. And I hope that she's also pointing out this absolute complicity by DeSantis and targeting people, because this is that dystopian fascist fear that they're trying to instill on minority voters and people who don't look like them, to scare them from voting. And here's the thing. He did this knowing he could use it as a political prop. That's the only reason why they've done this. He said, these people are going to pay. This is voter fraud. And the dupes down there who don't know the difference and don't read the papers, they go, oh, see, there's the black people again committing election fraud.
And folks, if you want to know where there's actual voter fraud in Florida, it's 2 places. I'll tell you the 2 places in Florida there's actual voter fraud.
Palm Beach
the
County.
Miami Cuban Republican community and the Villages.
Oh, yeah, the Villages.
Strangely enough, the voter fraud police don't seem to be in those 2 communities. I can't imagine why that could be. It's just a fucking mystery.
If you want to be as outraged as we are about this, the story is in the Tampa Bay Times, and there's actual video. I tweeted this out too. There is police cam footage of them arresting these poor people who are on their way to work or who had no idea what was going on. They're like, voter fraud? What are you talking about? Not only do they have to get arrested, they had to get booked, and they had to pay money to get bonded out. Come on.
It's obscene.
It's obscene. It really is. But if you don't think that that's not the beginning, that is the beginning. This is how that shit starts, under the guise of election integrity and a security team. No,
they have armed Florida Department of Law Enforcement, SWAT teams, essentially, being deputized by this election police task force to do these arrests. They're treating them like high impact, high risk arrests. This is a truly outrageous and repulsive decision. And the fact of the matter is, there's only one small thing I'm feeling a little relief about Ron DeSantis is, you know that meme where the girl's looking over her shoulder, the guy's looking over his shoulder at the new girl?
Yes.
A lot of the Republican super donor money in the last week has been like, ooh, this Carrie Lake sure is sexy. We like that one. She can run. And they're not wrong.
No. Ruby Kramer has written a really fascinating and informative profile on Carrie Lake. I suggest people Google it and read it. She is incredibly ambitious. She is disciplined and well put together. Do not underestimate that. She is Donald Trump with a better filter, better makeup, and in heels.
Don't sleep on celebrities, guys.
Yes, it's the state of our culture right now, and you've got to fight fire with fire, which is, of course, what we do every day here at the Lincoln Project. It's why we exist. It's why we exist. So, anyway. On that note, shout out again to the union, and for folks who are interested in getting involved and feel like, what can I do in these last few weeks? Because voting has already started.
Yep.
Good news in Georgia, record numbers of people on the first day of early voting.
140,000 people in Georgia came out to vote.
Which is extraordinary, but we don't know who.
Everybody, this year, the election turnout this year on both sides is going to be ungodly high.
Which is a good thing.
Vote early.
That's a good thing. My husband and I had to, because we moved, so I had to check and make sure our voter registrations were squared away, which I got the clearance. Yes, we are. So we're going to go early vote at some point in the next week. But yes, please, folks, be diligent about this. Our democracy depends on it. So check out the union. It's the union.us, I believe, if you want to go and see where you can help out as well as doing your due diligence and voting ahead of time. Yep. And also, I got to tell you, Rick, you know, the quality of what you guys are putting out, we are on top of this, constantly putting out content, showing and highlighting what these people are doing. Literally, it is a binary choice, folks. It really, really is. So I firmly believe there is more of us than there are of them, but it doesn't matter if we don't get to the polls and vote, and if you don't have the information. So keep up the great work, what your creative team is doing, Rick. And
I have to thank everybody on the team, as always. Michelle, Ben, Joey, Kate, Jeff, Riley. I mean, the whole gang is just astoundingly great. And I am delighted and honored every day to see how hard they work. Don, all these folks that really put this stuff together and get the content out there at such a speed and with such high quality. And, you know, it's because, folks, that the Lincoln Project is driven by a mission. We don't have a client except America. We don't have a special interest group that we work for. We're not selling lobbying access to anybody. We are a true grassroots democratic advocacy organization, and that's a small d on the democratic. We believe this republic cannot stand if we have one party dedicated to authoritarianism and fascism and one party that doesn't know how to fight its way out of a paper bag. And it's the closing weeks, folks. Every donation right now counts more than ever. Mm-hmm. We are really pushing hard into some of these Secretary of State races, key governor and U.S. Senate races. We have an ad coming up that taking out Dr. Oz in the next 24 hours. That I think you're going to find is one of our strongest of the year.
Yes.
We're doing the work across the board. If you can support us, we deeply appreciate it. We're at lincolnproject.us/donate. And otherwise, if you can't afford to support us, share our content, push out social media, join the union and volunteer. But most of all, get out there and cast your vote for democracy and for America.
100%. Before we go, let's take a question, because we promised we would take questions from our audience, and we sometimes forget because we get on these rants about things.
Get on a tear.
No, well, you know, there's a lot going on. It's important. Okay, what about the Secretary of State races? Well, we, as Rick just said, we've been focusing on those Secretary of State races, pointing out who the bad actors are. It's not only Arizona, but also you got a cuckoo election denier in Nevada, which is another place that has an increasingly close Senate race that Democrats could lose, and we don't want that. And then you have a guy who has already said they won't accept election results. They would, who knows what's going to happen in 2024 in what's his name, Laxalt?
Adam Laxalt.
Yeah. So that's another one. And then, as we know, in Pennsylvania, it's really important that Josh Shapiro wins and Doug Mastriano does not, because Pennsylvania actually the governor appoints the Secretary of State there. Those are some of the places that we've been concentrating on, Secretary of State. But that's part of the down ballot races that we keep telling people. It's not just about the Congress and the Senate. It's also about who is down ballot. Find out who your Secretary of State is and where they stand on one issue. Do they, in fact, believe that Joe Biden was elected duly as the president of the United States, or are they an election denier? Because it's not just an election denier. That means you're a democracy denier.
That's it.
And that's what we're facing. So on that, we are not democracy deniers. We are democracy freedom fighters. And we thank you all for that. And we will see you guys on Thursday.
Have a great night, everybody. Thanks.
Good night.